It was supposed to come out like a year and a half ago. And then we went after them so hard because of their variety of ridiculous sins that they actually went into full-scale reshoots on Snow White when we announced that we had a competitor.
Ben Shapiro's take on the ongoing Snow White debacle featuring Rachel Zegler quickly became yet another flashpoint in an already chaotic media storm. True to his signature no-nonsense style, he broke down Rachel's interviews, her dismissive attitude toward the 1937 original, and the mess that is Disney's current live-action strategy.
My grandmother saw the original in the theaters, obviously. People had so connected emotionally with the character of Snow White that when she eats from the apple and she dies, people were literally weeping in the theater because they liked the character of Snow White so much. It seems like it's difficult to imagine a situation in which anyone was weeping in the theater as Rachel Zegler's character goes into a coma after eating an apple.
His commentary, sharp and unfiltered, was seen by many as a public dismantling of both Rachel's performance and her entire mindset toward the legacy film. At this point, the controversy had already ballooned into a circus of drama, with on-set friction, scrapped press tours, alleged behind-the-scenes disputes, and even a full-blown animated roast making headlines long before Shapiro weighed in.
A few lessons for Disney. Number one, stop cannibalizing all your old IP. Like, it's really bad. It's really bad business. Number two, please stop changing all of the historic plots, which actually have meaning to generations of people, to instead become generic woke story about how woman leads revolutionary uprising and she don't need no man.
The outrage really ignited when Rachel Zegler's remarks surfaced, critiquing the original film as outdated and irrelevant in today's world. The response was swift and divided. While some applauded her for trying to bring the tale into the 21st century, others saw it as an unnecessary attack on a treasured piece of film history. The situation only worsened as reports of chaos behind the scenes trickled out. Whispers of endless script revisions, rumored friction between Rachel and co-star Gal Gadot, and Disney executives in damage control mode painted a picture of a production spiraling out of control.
Who wants to see Rachel Zegler in anything? You see her everywhere, and every time you see her, she's being obnoxious. And so these studios really ought to go to their stars, and they ought to stop trotting them out to say dumb political nonsense before releasing a kid's flick.
But the moment things truly exploded online, that would be the surprise appearance of Snow White in a South Park episode. The animated parody featured a caricature of Rachel on a self-righteous crusade to fix society, belittling colleagues and steamrolling over advice from Disney leadership. Social media erupted with memes, and the Snow White scandal, already hanging by a thread, was suddenly everywhere.
A few lessons for Disney. Number one, stop cannibalizing all your old IP. Like, it's really bad. It's really bad business. Number two, please stop changing all of the historic plots, which actually have meaning to generations of people, to instead become generic woke story about how woman leads revolutionary uprising and she don't need no man.
Enter Ben Shapiro. Never one to sit out a culture war, he jumped straight into the fray. In one of his broadcasts, Shapiro rolled tape from Rachel's interviews and contrasted her comments with scenes from the original film and reactions from outraged fans. He criticized what he saw as the arrogance of rejecting a classic that had resonated with audiences for nearly a century, warning that Rachel's stance felt more combative than constructive. According to Shapiro, the magic of the original lay in its heartfelt simplicity, and rewriting its foundations risked alienating the very fans who loved it most. He also pointed to the supposed backstage drama as symbolic of a much larger cultural rift.
It had the lowest opening, under 50 million, of any of these live-action Disney remakes that they've ever had.
The clash between preserving timeless stories and injecting them with modern ideological overhauls. Rachel Zegler's team, already reeling from the viral South Park humiliation, reportedly viewed Ben Shapiro's takedown as the most infuriating blow yet. According to industry whispers, Rachel felt deeply mischaracterized, particularly in how her intentions were portrayed.
I really hope that I have a similar heart to hers. She has this beautiful, unending kindness and positive outlook towards the world and the world around us. I wish I could be as positive as she is at times. That's certainly a difference we have, but I think it's a very human thing to not always see the bright side. But that is part of the beauty of Snow White. It has been for 88 years now that she just sees the good in everyone and everything. And I hope that I and so many people who watch this film can embody that as well.
In numerous interviews, she'd clarified that her goal was to inject more agency into the character of Snow White. Less damsel in distress, more independent heroine. But Shapiro rebranded that narrative into a wholesale rejection of the fairy tale purity that defined Disney's earliest animations. Whether he intended it or not, this reframing painted Rachel as someone who not only disregarded tradition, but actively sneered at it. And for Shapiro's audience, many of whom already had one foot out the door with Disney's so-called woke evolution, this interpretation landed like gospel. It confirmed every suspicion they'd been harboring about where the House of Mouse was heading.
The argument should have been from Peter Dinklage, there's power of being on TV, there's power of television, and to put 7 people with dwarfism on camera in a major Disney movie, there's still power there. If the story is offensive, change the story, don't change the characters.
Because right now there's more dwarves on this podcast than there are in the new Snow White movie. And that's probably due to Peter Dinklage.
Yep.
Inside Disney headquarters, things weren't exactly calm. CEO Bob Iger was already juggling a laundry list of disasters. Limp box office returns, growing skepticism around the latest Marvel installments, and the ongoing train wreck that was Daredevil, born again on Disney+. The last thing on earth they needed was Ben Shapiro tossing gasoline onto the already raging inferno. Behind closed doors, executives reportedly scrambled to find a strategy. Do they double down on this modern reimagining that they think today's audience craves? Or do they throw a lifeline to the nostalgic crowd desperately clinging to the emotional DNA of the originals? Shapiro's monologue didn't just call out the mess, it practically put a spotlight on the studio's internal tug-of-war, exposing the indecision to an already furious fan base.
A few lessons for Disney. Number 1, stop cannibalizing all your old IP. Like, it's really bad. It's really bad business. Number 2, please stop changing all of the historic plots, which actually have meaning to generations of people, to instead become generic woke story about how woman leads revolutionary uprising and she don't need no man.
And just when it seemed the drama couldn't get any messier, the whispers of a feud between Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot started gaining volume. Word on the street was that Rachel wasn't thrilled with Gal going off script during takes, particularly when those improvised moments gave the evil queen a little too much shine. From Rachel's perspective, this pulled focus away from Snow White, undermining the very empowerment she'd been trying to inject into the role.
We are now at a 1 out of 10 on IMDb for the new Snow White, and it couldn't happen to a better person. What is the lesson to be learned here with this Snow White disaster?
Yeah, we had more dwarfs than we did viewers in most of these theaters. And as you know, there were no dwarfs other than some CGI weird generated version of them.
Shapiro pounced on this, holding it up as yet another example of what he viewed as modern Hollywood's inability to handle creative friction. According to him, not every scene needs to carry the weight of a manifesto, and when actors treat every line like it's a political statement, they lose the essence of storytelling. Insiders claimed Gal mostly stayed above the drama, channeling her energy into perfecting her portrayal of the villainess and keeping quiet off set.
The fact that this film is completely falling apart, we're going to take a look at how bad this movie is actually doing in the box office, because it is hilariously bad. It is a complete and total humiliation for Disney, and like I said, they deserve it all, okay?
Rachel, on the other hand, was reportedly vocal about her mission to protect the future of Snow White, a line that, depending on who you ask, was either an inspiring rallying cry or an eye-roll-inducing soundbite. The string of canceled promotional appearances only underscored how deep the chaos ran. One by one, high-profile events vanished from the calendar. Talk show circuits, a rumored Saturday Night Live appearance, and even whispers of a musical performance at Disney World were all quietly axed. Official statements blamed scheduling issues and unforeseen conflicts. But according to insiders, the truth was far less diplomatic. Disney was reportedly petrified of putting a live microphone in Rachel Zegler's hands.
She is a PR nightmare. I don't know how anyone would hire her.
Her track record in interviews had become a liability. Every offhand comment seemed to trigger another internet firestorm. Ben Shapiro pounced on this, pointing to it as a glaring sign that Rachel was not following the tried-and-true promotional rulebook expected for a flagship Disney release. If the studio was afraid to let their own leading actress talk about the film, Shapiro asked, how could audiences possibly have faith that the finished product would be coherent, let alone respectful to its legacy? Behind the scenes, Rachel's frustration was reportedly hitting a boiling point. Sources claimed she felt that every step of the fallout, from her comments and the public backlash to the South Park parody and Shapiro's relentless critiques, had twisted her intentions beyond recognition.
But Rachel Zegler made it so hateable that you really sabotaged and took hundreds of millions of dollars from the studio. I don't know how anyone would ever want to go into business with her ever.
What she had meant as a sincere attempt to reframe Snow White for modern audiences had, in her eyes, become fuel for a cynical culture war. The parody, in particular, was said to have stung deeply, reducing what she saw as a progressive effort into a punchline. Yet even her team understood that firing back too aggressively might only add more gasoline to the fire. Executives at Disney, desperate to avoid further embarrassment, reportedly urged Rachel to keep quiet unless absolutely necessary. That enforced silence quickly led to rumors that her relationship with the studio was fraying. And if the movie somehow beat the odds and became a box office success, the big question was, would Rachel even stick around for a sequel?
A few lessons for Disney. Number one, stop cannibalizing all your old IP. Like, it's really bad. It's really bad business. Number two, please stop changing all of the historic plots, which actually have meaning to generations of people, to instead become generic woke story about how woman leads revolutionary uprising and she don't need no man.
Ben Shapiro, never one to let up once he had momentum, continued hammering the same point. He reminded his audience that the original Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, released in 1937, was not just any film, but Disney's first full-length animated feature. For many critics and fans alike, it holds a revered spot in film history, something close to sacred. Shapiro argued that by aggressively rewriting or discarding so many of the story's beloved traits, the remake was courting disaster with longtime Disney loyalists. And it wasn't just older fans raising eyebrows. Even younger viewers were expressing discomfort with how forcefully the narrative was being altered. Shapiro made it clear, not every classic needs to be re-engineered to fit a modern mold, and doing so recklessly could torpedo both the film and the reputations of those involved in bringing it to life.
1.9 out of 10 on IMDb, and those, by the way, they weren't dwarves, they were called bandits. So the Snow White doesn't, like, the amount of, like, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. Leave it the alone. Yeah, that's it. If it ain't broke, break it. Like, leave these stories alone. By the way, if she never opened her mouth and she didn't do all this nonsense, people would have gone and watched the movie. They would have made their money, but then people would have been disappointed after the math.
The South Park episode became a turning point in Ben Shapiro's ongoing breakdown of the Snow White circus. With obvious delight, he picked apart scene after scene in which the animated Rachel Zegler came off as overbearing and completely disconnected from the reality around her. In the parody, a Disney executive is shown trembling under her scathing tirades, while even the evil queen seems confused by the relentless grandstanding. Real-world viewers couldn't help but notice the uncanny parallels. Side-by-side videos began surfacing online, juxtaposing actual clips of Rachel's interviews with South Park's scripted jabs. The line between satire and truth, practically invisible. Shapiro used this to drive home his point. When a comedy cartoon nails the tone and messaging of a controversy this precisely, something's gone very wrong with the original messaging.
I mean, he's totally right. Now, of course, as we covered, the movie is terrible anyway in its own right. It was probably going to underperform regardless. People are tired of the soulless cash grab remake thing.
Meanwhile, Disney's top brass, led by Bob Iger and the board of directors, found themselves in an impossible bind. Responding to South Park would likely invite even more ridicule. But staying silent, that carried its own risks. In today's outrage-fueled media environment, silence is often interpreted as admission. Shapiro speculated that keeping quiet might indeed be Disney's best bet, but it also fed the perception that the studio had lost control of the narrative. Every day brought fresh leaks and whispered chaos, entire scenes allegedly being reshot, rewrites scrambling to reduce the most inflammatory material, and growing fears that the final product might be more Frankenstein than fairy tale.
And you know the saying, go woke, get broke, and Disney's going to lose money on this movie. And I believe it only made less than $1 million in China.
If Disney wants to make more woke films that tank at the box office, they are more than welcome to do that, but maybe think of an original idea.
Even as the scandal took darker turns, the comedy elements refused to die, thanks largely to South Park's staying power. Clips from the parody spread like wildfire across social media, with fans breaking them down frame by frame, comparing the satire to real-world events. Shapiro regularly featured these clips in his coverage, arguing that satire often cuts deeper than any news report. In the episode, the animated Rachel proudly proclaims herself the savior of a stale fairy tale, boldly rewriting it for the modern world while those around her look on in confusion or quiet horror.
Disney even sent some of their own producers, to go have a talk with Rachel Zegler and tell her, hey, you got to clean up your act. You got to delete this, this, and this. This is completely going to backfire. And she, being the girl boss that she is, said no, because she is the bravest, the truest, the fairest. She is incredible, guys. She is a girl boss, and you don't tell a girl boss what to do.
That image of someone charging ahead with a bold vision while ignoring every warning sign struck a chord with viewers who believed the real Rachel had steamrolled the heart of what made Snow White magical in the first place. To Rachel Zegler's supporters, the entire fiasco was a textbook case of a woman daring to voice her creative vision and being punished for it. In their view, she wasn't tearing anything down. She was trying to guide Snow White into a new chapter. The backlash, they argued, only proved that some corners of the audience were unwilling to let go of the past. Within these circles, Ben Shapiro wasn't a critic. He was a cultural agitator, someone leveraging outrage to promote a rigid, traditionalist view of storytelling. From their perspective, calling out the outdated aspects of the original 1937 film wasn't disrespectful. It was a practical step toward making a nearly century-old tale relevant again.
No one on the right side of America can stand the star of this movie.
But you don't seemingly like your own character, so she comes off as an insufferable, whiny brat.
But as social media discourse escalated, the gap between these opposing camps only widened. Back inside the Disney machine, the turmoil showed no signs of letting up. Every day brought new whispers. More scenes potentially on the chopping block, more reshoots rumored as damage control. The third act of the movie, reportedly the center of multiple creative clashes between Rachel, Gal Gadot, and the production team, had allegedly gone through so many rewrites that it barely resembled the original script. Some days, the evil queen's role was beefed up. The next, it was scaled back. The studio appeared to be walking a tightrope, trying to serve two masters at once. Modern audiences seeking empowerment and legacy fans craving the sentimental charm of the original.
And as we saw last weekend with the first weekend for Snow White, Rachel Zegler was coping real hard. She, of course, was saying things like on Instagram like, thank you so much for making this the #1 movie in the world, guys. And well, this time around with the second weekend, her approach is completely different, okay?
Shapiro turned this into yet another critique, accusing Disney of spinelessness, shape-shifting to dodge controversy rather than sticking to a clear creative direction. As the premiere date crept closer, one thing became clear. No one had a clue how the film would fare. Maybe curiosity alone would fill theater seats, with audiences eager to see whether the final cut matched the drama. Maybe the Disney brand, time-tested and family-friendly, would be enough to override the noise. Or maybe, just maybe, the relentless backlash would scare viewers away altogether.
Did the dwarfs make it or no?
Well, the CGI dwarfs did. Of course, that goes back to the original controversy where Peter Dinklage, a very talented little person actor, said, why are we doing that? We've hired a Latina actress to be Snow White. That's progressive. But you're going to hire little people to play the dwarfs? That just seems like a step backwards. And then, of course, Disney instantly buckled and said, okay, we're going to add magical creatures. And then the picture of the magical creatures leaked online, and everyone just had an absolute blast laughing at it. So the magical creatures are here in the movie. The CGI dwarfs are here in the movie. It works to a degree, but it's certainly going to be a financial hit for Disney, that's for sure.
Shapiro predicted that Disney's final marketing push might try to reframe the movie as an innocent modernization, hoping to soften the backlash. But with press appearances canceled and interviews scaled to a minimum, it was anyone's guess whether the studio could steer the conversation back in their favor, especially when most of the audience had already made up their minds. Rachel Zegler's true state of mind remained a mystery. Whispers from behind the scenes suggested she felt angry and betrayed, but public statements from her team were few and far between, navigating the tightrope between defending oneself and honoring Disney's apparent request for silence was no easy feat. If she stayed quiet, voices like Ben Shapiro's could dominate the narrative without resistance. But speaking up again, that could set off yet another public relations explosion. It was the worst kind of no-win situation for an actress still early in her career. Audiences waited to see whether she would eventually challenge Shapiro's commentary head-on or continue following Disney's strategy of radio silence.
It's the thing that really shocks me about this story, Disney and all these media companies, they invest hundreds of millions of dollars into these projects, right? Have they ever thought about maybe like a little bit of vulnerability study, opposition research, that sort of thing before you go and hire some Zoomer who's a lunatic?
For outside observers, the entire debacle became a bizarre mix of corporate bungling, cultural clashes, and personal fallout. Rachel's depiction as an overzealous crusader in satirical animations, the persistent gossip about tensions with Gal Gadot, and the vanishing lineup of promotional appearances all combined into a media storm so intense, it drowned out any sincere artistic aspirations the film may have once had. Shapiro's ever-present commentary reminded the public that in Hollywood, even the smallest misstep can become a viral spectacle. As the saga unfolded, the rest of the entertainment world was watching closely. Executives, filmmakers, and actors from competing studios took notes, recognizing the risks of tinkering too heavily with beloved intellectual property.
Every Disney movie is about a woman waiting for a man, okay? Sleeping Beauty, she is comatose until a man comes to kiss her and wake her up. Rapunzel, she's up in a tower, taking biotin, hair vitamins, waiting for a man. This is what these women are
Cinderella.
doing. Is it the best? Yes, Cinderella. Is this the best message to send to young girls? No, but you don't have to rewrite and rework the classics. Come up with something new, you guys.
Some insiders speculated that Snow White 2025 might be a turning point. A moment that forced Disney to rethink, or at least recalibrate, its live-action remake playbook. Others weren't so sure, believing Disney's momentum was too great to be slowed by a single disaster. Whether it became a cautionary tale or just a temporary hiccup, one thing was clear. Snow White had become far more than a movie. It was now a cultural lightning rod. Even among those desensitized to Hollywood's endless cycle of wins and flops, the scale of this implosion felt unlike anything the industry had seen, especially from a family-friendly empire like Disney, known for controlling its public image with surgical precision. But this time, the walls cracked. The perfect storm had arrived, a lead actress unafraid to speak her mind, a cherished original dating back nearly 90 years, a fractured creative team, a hypercritical internet culture ready to seize on every stumble, and a meme-hungry social media base feeding the frenzy. Add in a razor-sharp satirical show with a reputation for torching pop culture, plus a high-profile conservative commentator like Ben Shapiro with a massive reach, and the unraveling became inevitable. By the time the dust began to settle, one thing was obvious. Regardless of box office numbers, this film would live on as a cautionary tale.
And Disney has canceled all of Rachel Zegler's appearances on their media platforms. Kind of tough if you are the biggest media company on earth to have that company turn against you.
A warning of what can happen when a cultural cornerstone is reimagined without a unified, thoughtful approach. Rachel Zegler may have entered the project with noble intentions, hoping to reshape a classic through a modern lens, but she ended up cast as the antagonist in the very story she aimed to update. Shapiro's relentless dissection of her comments and the film's production hit a nerve, reinforcing the idea that both Disney and its star had lost touch with what made the original so beloved. His critics accused him of stoking outrage for personal gain, but the way his analysis resonated with both longtime Disney fans and modern skeptics suggested he'd struck a chord far deeper than mere politics. Behind the scenes, Rachel's alleged fury over the South Park episode and Shapiro's ongoing critiques only added to the irony. because the more visibly upset she became, the more those portrayals dominated headlines. The actual film, its story, its visuals, even its performances, all of that faded into the background. What remained was a media firestorm shaped by personal grudges, corporate panic, and internet echo chambers. With more and more scenes reportedly left on the cutting room floor, speculation grew that the final version might feel like a confused patchwork, trying to please everyone and succeeding with no one.
The film received backlash for various reasons in the lead up to its release. Zegler had called the original Snow White movie dated and weird and said Prince Charming was a stalker.
For fans who had grown up on the whimsical charm of the 1937 Snow White, this new version felt like it had veered off course before it even reached the screen. The idea of modernizing the tale wasn't necessarily wrong, but the execution got lost in a maze of ego clashes, PR disasters, and a relentless spotlight from commentators like Shapiro, whose rapid-fire, no-apologies critiques ensured the backlash echoed far beyond the film's intended audience. His takedown of Zegler's vision didn't just shape the public conversation, it became it. As the chaos finally began to cool, one question lingered in the air. Could the movie itself, when it eventually hit theaters, rise above the wreckage and deliver something powerful enough to flip the narrative? Every now and then, a film surprises everyone, clawing its way out of controversy to win over audiences in spite of the noise. But in this case, the sheer weight of bad press was overwhelming. The scandal had gone on for so long and cut so deep that most believed any shot at redemption was long gone. Even if the final product turned out to be halfway decent, the cloud hanging over it might prove too dense for viewers to judge it fairly.
I can't get over the sense of entitlement and to show up, to criticize the bosses, to suggest that they're white supremacists, to demand more money like you're not getting paid adequately, to rip on the plot that you've been asked to embody as the actress. Like, she's just one big ball of entitlement, which is what we all hate.
Weird.